U.S. Presidents and Native Americans, a history of destruction and protection. The history of the United States is inseparable from the story of its indigenous peoples. The fate of Native American tribes was deeply shaped by the policies of each U.S. president. Some presidents ordered forced removals and bloodshed, while others tried, though often too late, to protect Native rights. This article explores which presidents brought the most destruction and which tried to stand up for Native communities. The symbol of forced removal, Andrew Jackson. Of all U.S. presidents, none inflicted more harm on Native Americans than Andrew Jackson, the seventh president, 1829-1837. Jackson signed the infamous Indian Removal Act of 1830, which authorized the forced displacement of Native tribes from their ancestral homelands to make way for white settlers. The tragic result was the Trail of Tears. Tens of thousands of Cherokees, Choctaws, Creeks, Seminoles, and other tribes were driven from their lands and forced to march thousands of miles on foot. Thousands died along the way from hunger, disease, and exposure. Historians often describe Jackson's actions as bordering on genocide. Others who continued this policy. Jackson's policies did not end with him. Other presidents continued the displacement and destruction of Native communities. Martin Van Buren, 1837-1841, enforced the final stages of the Trail of Tears, carrying out Jackson's orders. Ulysses S. Grant, 1869-1877, presided over the peak of the so-called Indian Wars, including battles like Little Bighorn. Although he promoted a peace policy in theory, the U.S. Army kept seizing Native lands. Earlier presidents like James Monroe and Thomas Jefferson also laid the groundwork for removal. Jefferson spoke of civilizing natives, but steadily pushed for their lands to be taken. Presidents who tried to protect Native rights. Not every president pursued outright destruction. Some tried, however imperfectly, to defend Native interests. Among the best known are the Roosevelt presidents and Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln, 1861-1865. Lincoln is famous for abolishing slavery, but his legacy with Native Americans is complicated. In 1862, during the Dakota War in Minnesota, Lincoln approved the largest mass execution in U.S. history. 38 Dakota men were hanged after an uprising. Originally, over 300 were sentenced to death, but Lincoln personally reduced the number, trying to prevent even greater bloodshed. While not exactly a champion of Native rights, he did attempt to limit violence. Theodore Roosevelt, 1901-1909. Theodore Roosevelt didn't dramatically change Indian policy but did help preserve natural lands that included Native territories. However, his belief that Native Americans were a vanishing race has been heavily criticized. Franklin D. Roosevelt, 1933-1945. True change came under Franklin D. Roosevelt. In 1934, he signed the Indian Reorganization Act, which ended forced assimilation policies and restored some self-governance to Native tribes. For the first time in decades, tribes could form their own governments again and manage their own lands. Modern presidents. In modern times, U.S. presidents have paid more attention to Native American rights. Barack Obama, 2009-2017, opened more direct dialogue with Native communities and increased investments in tribal infrastructure. Joe Biden, 2021-present, appointed the first Native American cabinet secretary, Deb Haaland, as Secretary of the Interior. This historic step has given Native nations more say in protecting their lands and sacred sites. Conclusion. The history of U.S. presidents is a lesson in how government actions can devastate indigenous peoples or attempt to right historic wrongs. Andrew Jackson and his successors forced entire nations off their lands, while leaders like Franklin D. Roosevelt and some modern presidents took steps toward restoring Native sovereignty. This history is a reminder A people's land and rights are sacred. The tragedy faced by Native Americans stands as a warning of how devastating injustice can be.